Welcome to the Campus Earth curriculum with Brandy and Vinny here on the Grassroots Warrior Network. Today we are so pleased to have a really special guest, Miss Cynthia Chung. And Vinny, I'll let you.
Yeah, Cynthia is the co-founder of the Rising Tide Foundation with her husband, Matt Arrett. They also have the Canadian Patriot Press, and it is just such a pleasure to have you. You're also you're author of your first book that I think Brandy has right there that she can show everyone. What's that title again, Brandy?
The Empire on Which the Black Sun Never Set, The Birth of International Fascism and the Anglo-American Foreign Policy. Wow. I mean,
yeah, it's a bit of a mouthful of a title.
Cynthia, that book is wonderful. I mean, after I finished it, I felt like I could just start over and start reading it again. I mean, it's just so packed with a lot of good information, excellent research. And I was thinking this morning when I got up, I was like, we got Cynthia Chung going to be talking about Assange and the Durham report and all this. And it feels like we could call this the rise of the whistleblowers, because it really feels like it's a time right now where the more people that can come on out and share their stories and share what they have to offer, especially if they were on the inside in some aspects of the global deep state or the medical chemical vaccine complex, or all these different complexes, it really is what people seem to be hungry for. Like they really want to know what's going on behind the scenes. And because of the kind of research you've been doing, it really illuminates some of these issues that we're dealing with right now. So, Brandy, do you have the screen share of her essay that she was going to go into? Because I thought we might just bring that up as she gets into this.
Give me 1 second. I actually wasn't quite as ready as I thought I was.
Don't worry, we can be casual. Is there a time limit for this interview or?
Nope, we've got as much time as you want.
Okay.
Okay, now I've got it at the beginning. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, because it's such a cool, the way she lays it out. And this is Cynthia's Substack channel.
Through a glass darkly. Okay, let me move this out of the way. Yes, if you want to help free Assange, you need to recognize the importance of the Durham report. So Cynthia, I'll hand it over to you and let you go from there.
Yes, I was actually shocked about hearing about the Durham report, because I'm kind of like you guys that I don't really like to pay attention to the news on too regular of a basis. Like I'm not checking the news blips on my phone all of the time, because there's just so much useless content at this point and I also need to have some kind of positive space for myself that I just can't do it. But luckily my husband is Matthew Arrett. So he's working on his newest video of who is your enemy, and going over, is Russia your enemy, and the part 2 will be, is China your enemy? And obviously, the answers, if you know anything about us, is no. But he was bringing up the Durham report in this video, and that's when I first heard of it. I mean, it had been I guess a week after it had been released, and I was like, what is this Durham report? And it was incredible when I was looking on the internet as to like how this was being reported, that there were so many news headlines talking about it in such a mocking fashion, and saying that it was being disingenuous, that the Atlantic even called it a wicked flop, if I remember correctly, where not only was it a flop because it apparently failed to deliver any new news, but it was wicked because it was demanding again, or not demanding, it was basically calling for, suggesting the reformation of the FBI. And so, first of all, it was like, well, why is it being criticized for like the information it has brought forward? And basically, the Durham report was something that was started in 2019 as a result of the FBI investigations, the Crossfire hurricane investigations that started and around the 2016-2015 time, which was really focusing around the Trump campaign, but also the 2016 US elections. And there was already the Horowitz report that had gone through that specifically of the FBI's conduct in that. And it was already found by the Horowitz report that the FBI was basically not following the law in how they were progressing with these investigations. However, the Horowitz report, to kind of like soften the scandal, was he said that, oh, they did it out of incompetence and negligence, not out of conscious, criminal intent or bias or political agenda. But he never proved that, right? He just asserted that. And this has been used as like a way to kind of as a shield against the Durham report, because the Durham report is not even necessarily saying outright that there's a political bias, but it's like, if you've continued an investigation over and over again, because it continued after the Crossfire investigation with the Mueller investigation, and it's still ongoing. You had the Mar-a-Lago FBI raid on Trump's house this past August, and there's continued. They're going through those papers right now to try to find something. It's ongoing, but they've never had any basis to begin with. And so the Durham report is basically just a more rigorous investigation into, again, confirming that there was really nothing to this. And contrary to how this is being like sold on public, many of these main media platforms, the Horowitz report, when it came out in 2019, there was a call for the reform of the FBI. Do you know what happened as a consequence of this? I would wonder if the average person knows. The FBI said, oh yeah, we did a little tweaks on our own. And so apparently it's okay. And that's the excuse. So when the Durham report now is again saying like the FBI really needs to be reformed because they just basically were not following the law, but not just not following the law, they're abusing the fact that they're not held accountable by the law, to the point where it's like, why are we so concerned about the 2016 US election interference without really taking it into account that perhaps the FBI is also interfering and making election interference, which is clearly what is going on right now leading up to the 2024 elections. If there has been nothing to base these investigations on and that they're continuing, this is a violation of the public's right. And people might think like, well, whatever, I don't like Trump anyway. But it isn't about whether you like Trump or not, because, and this is why I wanted to pair this subject of the Durham report with the Assange story, which is, again, very odd because there are a lot of people who like Assange who hate Trump. And they're not able to kind of put the story together, I find, because again, like, it doesn't matter whether you want Trump president or not. The point is that if you believe that you live in a democratic country and you have civil liberties and that you have the right to, hold politicians and certain other figures that are shaping policy, shaping law in your country accountable, then you have to be interested in the Durham report because it is a violation of people's rights. And part of this is that the FBI has also caused problems with the whistleblowers. The FBI, the CIA and the NSA, they're all working together. So it's not just, separate institutions. It's all like one kind of, octopus or whatever.
Operation. Yeah.
Yeah. Along with the Five Eyes, and as we're going to see, MI6 also plays a big role in a lot of these problems, including with the Assange case. So the issue with Assange was that he interfered in the 2016 US elections because somehow they thought everyone was going to love Hillary, even though Hillary has a long track record of scandal and controversy, including the Benghazi thing, which we will get into later on, because that's a very important thing to talk about. But she didn't have a perfect, pristine record. And this email scandal came out and she acted like, this was completely, concocted by WikiLeaks, and Assange specifically, and that Assange, withheld information about Trump. It was clearly a bias, and he's probably working with the Russians. All kinds of accusations that were being thrown about. None of these accusations, these allegations against both Assange or Trump or the Trump election campaign that was found with the Mueller report investigation, which was focusing on those things, they couldn't find anything to really back this up. And the only thing that they said is like, oh, well, we have a bit of proof of Russian interference with like fake social media accounts and fake hashtags. Like, give me a break. You control all of the big media heads in the country. You censor people like crazy. You don't allow whistleblowers to speak out. You don't allow for people's content to be freely shared on like YouTube. Google censors people too on searches, and you're going to complain about Russia's like a few fake social media accounts and hashtags? Come on. The reason why Trump was elected is because he was elected. And Assange did clearly influence people's decisions of what they ultimately thought about Hillary, but that was a legal influence into the elections because the people deserve to be informed. And that's what is really at the crux. One of the core issues in this whole thing is not, whether you're camp this or you're camp that or whatever. People have the right to be informed about what is going on in their country. And what their country is doing within their domestically, but also foreignly too. Like citizens should be concerned about what their country is doing in other countries. And so Assange was a real powerhouse in the sense where he was not only showcasing the problems with the war on terror, which again, this article goes through a lot, but I think, it's what's great about you guys is that I know that I have time. So
Yes.
I'm confident I can actually talk about these things, because sometimes there's so many commercials and I only have 30 minutes to talk about something that's like so
I
broad.
can listen to you talk forever, Cynthia. Honestly, you're so good. You're such a good teacher, and you're able to put really a lot of information into concise statements. So I appreciate you. So you've got all the time you want.
And you guys feel free to interrupt at any point, but I guess I'm just trying to paint the canvas that we'll begin with. But that was the issue with Assange, was that he was at first well before the 2016 US elections, and this was when the rape allegations from Sweden started, I think back in 2010, if I remember correctly. So he was starting to expose the war on terror, basically war crimes that were going on. And Chelsea Manning was a big intelligence source to this, the whistleblower, who was leaking a lot of the intelligence because she was an intelligence analyst based in Iraq, I believe, at the time. And released a whole bunch of content to Assange that he was publishing within a 2-year period, I think from something like 2010 to 2012 or something like that. And so you get this weird allegation from Sweden of a rape charge and all this. Assange has to go into the Venezuelan embassy for protection. And what's interesting is that Sweden eventually drops all charges against him. They claim that too much time had passed by, and so there wasn't a point. But Assange remains in the embassy because I think he was not trusting the United Kingdom government for leaving him alone at this point. But it seemed like there was no reason for him to seek sanctuary once Sweden dropped the charges. And then weirdly enough, you have a new president of Venezuela, or no, Ecuador, sorry, it's Ecuador, a new president of Ecuador. And then there starts to be a bit of heat for Assange. And then all of a sudden Sweden starts up the rape allegations again. And now all of a sudden this is an issue, right? Because the UK government was actually intervening. I think they arrested Assange right before Sweden, a month before Sweden restarted the rape case. They had arrested him on an old warrant from 2012, and they had arrested him. It's hard for me to remember the timeline right now because it's like all over the place, but I think in 2019. So it was an expired warrant. It wasn't even over anything that was even, you know, presently ongoing, right? Like they had dropped the case on him. So he's arrested with an expired warrant, and then Sweden restarts the rape allegations and the rape case on him a month after he's arrested, taken from the embassy by the British government over an expired warrant. So it seems like Sweden had to bring this up again to make it seem like it was legit. And it's like, well, you just said that there was no evidence, it was too old case and everything. And now you do it a month after he gets arrested. And then within like about 5 months, Sweden drops it again. So clearly never serious about the issue at all. It was more, you know, to try to cook the books really to make it look somewhat legit, although honestly if you look at the timeline more closely, which is actually hard to find a timeline, I had to work on finding a timeline. You'd think that the timeline would be so easy to find for someone like Assange, which is such a high profile case. And so, you know, that continue on. But people have to remember that all of that started first on Assange talking about the war crimes of the war on terror, and that Chelsea Manning was the whistleblower behind that intelligence. Then you had the 2016 US elections, right, that really made it an issue where, you know, Britain, you know, forced their way in a few years later. So Assange, during the US elections, basically just had intelligence on, you know, Hillary has a lot of crimes that she's committed. So, you know, anyway, the fact that he did
Hey,
this,
Cynthia, just to make a
yeah.
note on that, I mean, the Clinton crime families connections go so far back. I mean, all the way back into Mena, Arkansas, when he was governor. And then it just continues. It was almost like the work he did as governor kind of paved his way into the White House. So, I mean, there's something to be said for how these guys have been in the political crime families in cahoots with real mafia cartel type of organizations for both drug running and obviously we know human and child trafficking. I mean, all the black markets seem to thrive with these political crime families, yet there's no, how can you say, there's no prosecution. They appear, I mean, they can literally have people eliminated and then divert the attention to somebody like an Assange.
Yeah, I mean, it's so ridiculous what Trump has gone through and what Assange have gone through, where like even the Mueller investigation, they had to say that they didn't find anything on Assange, because they also tried to find something on Assange. They couldn't tie Assange to the Russiagate conspiracy, and they couldn't tie Trump or his campaign ultimately to it. Even though a few people were arrested, it wasn't, even the Mueller investigation had to conclude that there wasn't evidence of the Trump campaign or Trump colluding with the Russian government. And there was no evidence that Assange either had any ties to the Russian government. Whereas Hillary, just looking at some of her more famous controversies, and you know, the New York Times has been very good at reporting on this, and people can find the details in the article. But she's done the in the 1990s, the Whitewater controversy, the cattle futures controversy, the Clinton Foundation State Department controversy in the 2000s, and then in 2016, the email controversy. And what people need to realize is that she was caught during these FBI investigations, destroying her records, destroying state records, or putting them in a space where they could not be found by the investigations. And this was an ongoing thing. So by 2016, she had a long track record of destroying her own records during an FBI investigation, which is a federal crime. And yet she's never been held accountable for that. But we're going to go into every little nook and cranny of Trump's life to try to find some kind of crime, yet we still haven't found anything, but it's justified, leading up to an election. And we're really going to say that there isn't a political agenda in this. And that's where, what you're talking about with the mafia, the FBI, the intelligence service has become the mafia. Like Hillary is working for the mafia, and the intelligence services is also, working for this same kind of outlook. And this is how the American people are being viewed in this as well, because you have to wonder, why are they working so hard to deal with someone like Trump? Now, Assange, it's become a lot more clear because he clearly can shape the public's level of information based off of foreign policy and also elections, and that's the right of people to have those. Where this gets into a gray zone, and some people will actually attack someone like an Assange or an Edward Snowden, is that they say, like, well, that's a violation of national security. And that's where the whole Cold War doctrine comes into play. And if you look into the details of most of what has been backed in terms of war, including the Vietnam War, which was started off of a false flag, and then the Rand Corporation was caught by Daniel Ellsberg's leak that they were justifying the war illegally. The claims that were being made were illegal, and also even just the general premise was like insanity, that like Vietnam, which wasn't even a country at the time, was going to be some kind of big threat of like the spread of communism. It was ridiculous from the very start, and that really did a lot to destroy the fabric of American society. So many people came back from that, and families were destroyed, not just the individuals that fought in that war. And it also caused drug addiction as well. And a lot of the Vietnam War was actually for that, pumping illegal drugs. The war on terror too has been found to be associated, especially with Afghanistan and growing opium and all of this. And this drug money is used to fund the kind of criminal networks that these people are doing, including terrorism itself. And that is ultimately what we're talking about with Trump in terms of his connection with Flynn and Benghazi, which we can get into unless you want to say something.
Cynthia, you used a lot of really good books as part of your research for your book, and one of them was The Great Heroin Coup by Henrik Kruger. And I think that highlights a bit of the Vietnam War, if I recall, in subtitle was Intelligence and International Fascism. But obviously we know that it was an iron triangle in Vietnam in regards to the heroin specifically, which then I do believe got moved to Afghanistan in probably within about a decade's time, after we finally came out of Vietnam. But I imagine that book was one of a few of the different, and The Devil's Chessboard a bit explores that, David Talbert's book, which was another really amazing research source for people to check out.
Yeah, for sure.